Sorry for a delay there. My name is Jess Coonan. I'm with New York Sea Grant, which is a federal academic partnership between NOAA, Cornell, and SUNY in New York State. And I help facilitate the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network along with Emily Vale from the Hudson River Watershed Alliance with support from the Hudson River Estuary Program and the New York State Water Resources Institute. So today you are here for one of our lunch and learns. So we try to do these quarterly to just give a chance to hear from our members about projects that they're working on. So we've got a pretty big group today. We have a lot of new people. So if you could take the moment to introduce yourself in the chat, your name, affiliation, maybe where you're calling in from. And I'm going to do a brief introduction, just talking about FRN a little bit. Then we'll turn it over to our guest speaker, Mayor Armacost from Hastings-on-Hudson. We'll have time for Q&A. And then whatever remaining time we have, we'll do some roundtable updates from our municipalities. So the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network, the mission is to bring local governments together that are working on managing their current and future flood risks. And we do this because we know that here in New York, we're a home rule state. Adapting to flood risk really does fall on local governments. Many of them are very limited capacity, low population. There can be high turnover at times. And we recognize that this work really is advanced by dedicated individuals. And so what we do as a network is we just bring people together. And we do this through our lunch and learns like today. We also have in-person meetings. We've got one coming up later this month, which I'll talk about in a moment. And we also share opportunities. We send periodic emails with funding, education opportunities, and we host trainings. Later this spring, we're going to have a Land Use Leadership Alliance training for our FRN members. And then later in the year, we'll have a flood emergency communications training. So who can join the network? We really center municipalities in this work, local governments working in the Hudson River Estuary watershed, from towns, villages, cities, and counties. This is our map here of our current membership. So we are growing. We used to focus solely on the Hudson River waterfront, but we are expanding up into the watershed. And then we also have a level of membership for partners. So that's state agencies, private consulting firms, and regional organizations that are doing flood resilience work that can help support our. Oh, hey, can everybody make sure they're muted? Thank you. So to join, just go on our website. I think Emily is going to help me out and put some links in the chat for you today. And one final note, we have our meeting coming up in Kingston on March 27th. It's open to FRN members and partners or those looking to join. Registration is required. And we're going to have some speakers from the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services and the Department of State. They're going to talk about their funding programs, tools, and resources. And there'll always be time for networking, discussion, and Ulster County is going to give us a little walking tour on the lower Esopus Creek because there's a lot of interesting work going on there. So we're going to shift over to our speaker today. Just a reminder to please remain on mute. We're going to hold questions until the end. You can ask your question by raising your hand or asking it in the chat. And so, yeah, so how this all came to be today was Hastings-on-Hudson. They've been involved with the Flood Resilience Network since, I think, around 2020. I think it might have been my first meeting, as well as Mayor Armacost, where we did a walking tour in Piermont. And so recently we saw that they were awarded this grant. And even though construction hasn't started on the final project, we recognize that there's so much that go into on the front end of getting these grants, the planning, the defining the issue, getting buy-in. And so that's why we brought Mayor Armacost in today to kind of just tell us the story of how this came to be And that really highlights the value of FRN is, you know, just calling on the expertise of our members and their willingness to share. So we thank you so much for being here, Mayor Armacost. And with that, we can turn it over to you. And I will share my screen.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica, and thanks to the FRN for including us and giving us a chance to tell our story. I hope that this ends up being useful to those of you who are here on the call. If you will switch to the next slide and then the next one. I know that there are people from all over the state here on the call, but just to give you a sense of where we're located, we're 20 miles north of Manhattan. We're between the Hudson River and the Sawmill River. We're a relatively small municipality, 8,500 people, and we're just about 3 miles square. And we were incorporated back in 1879, which is significant, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The topography of the village is very hilly. There are steep slopes everywhere, and what that means is that we have a bunch of different watersheds. And the significance of incorporation is that back then, as I think you all know from your own municipalities, there was pretty much no regulation of what people could do. People developed their properties as they saw fit. And the kind of regulation that we now are all familiar with didn't really happen until certainly the 1950s, in most cases not till the 1970s or 80s. So the stormwater management systems ended up being quite antiquated. And if you'll go to the next slide, Jessica, the result for us is that the major highway that comes past our village, every time there is a major storm, the parkway floods. And you can see here images that the second photo along, there's a little dot in the middle. You can see a tree going across the sawmill. So it's called the Sawmill River Parkway, and you can see it's turned into a river. And there's actually a canoe. I don't know if you have a cursor that you can use, Jessica, but there's a little dot there, and those people are canoeing on the Sawmill River Parkway. Those two photos on the left side are from Hurricane Irene, and then the two on the right side, one is looking south and one is looking north, and they're from more recent storm events. But I'm sure many of you find this familiar, and for us, what it means is that the major entrances to our village are just completely flooded during these big storm events. So if you can go on to the next slide. Here are some photos of locations right around the Sawmill River. So you saw the flooding of the Sawmill River, and here you can see how the Sawmill River kind of comes onto other people's property and then into the village. There's one slide where you can see a car, a photo, a car. It's the second one along, Jessica, again, if you can use your cursor. There's a car that was stuck in the middle of the parkway and had to be rescued ultimately. And some of these other photos you can see here, houses that are on side roads that are next to the parkway, they flooded all the way up. And these two photos to the right, that house has its basement completely flooded during these events. These particular photos here are kind of at the parkway entrance of the project that I'm going to explain in a little more detail. And then if you can go on to the next slide. And this shows other flooding areas in the village. So you can see someone has a waterfall that isn't normally there in their back garden. You've got cars that end up being flooded. And I'm sure these photos are very familiar to municipal officials and Conservation Commission members and others who think about these issues in all of your municipalities. So it's quite severe. And if you'll go on to the next photo, what we ended up discovering is that our most recent official survey dates back to 1935. And I think perhaps some of you will have this similar experience. We're in the process of updating this. But what it means is that since the time the survey was done, there's been a lot of development which has exacerbated the issues that people are experiencing. And what's happened is that natural waterways and watercourses have been rerouted to accommodate development. They've either been built on top of where the courses were, or people have built around them and blocked them, and it's kind of added to the problem. And there's been no cohesive management plan that we can sort of determine in the history of the village. So on to the next slide. So we've had a lot of feedback from residents about the impact of the flooding in their specific locations. And so what we decided to do was commission a flood study to really map out the most hard hit areas in the village and to identify solutions. And our engineer is Hahn Engineering. And the study is what I'm gonna describe part of the study and give you a sense of some of the findings. If you can go on to the next slide. So what happened in the course of doing the study is that we ended up working out that we had many different watersheds, more than we really realized. You can sort of see them on the map here. And then if you go to the next slide, what we ended up doing was sort of identifying the high priority areas that are most susceptible to flooding. And one of them is this area which we call Boutilliers Brook. And if you can go to the bottom section, can you trace the river? Yeah, exactly. The river goes along here, and you can see it splits. And it actually goes up to where the words site BB7 are. It ends up kind of going underneath people's homes. So come down a little bit with your cursor and follow the river below that, and you'll go up to the word site BB7, and you keep going. And along here, the watershed, the river is actually going underneath people's homes. If you come all the way back, Jessica, to where it forks and go north, I guess, from there. I think it's technically west, actually. This area here and the little strip of red that goes down from that is where we ended up doing our project. But this gives you a sense of the watershed. So if you go to the next slide, that's where we come to the EFC Green Resiliency Grant. And that brook that I was describing to you is called Boutilliers Brook. So if you go on to the next slide, what the study ended up identifying was millions and millions of dollars worth of projects in all of those different watershed areas. And so what we ended up doing was looking at the range of grant opportunities that were possible and trying to match up our projects with some of those grant areas. So some of them ended up being focused on the Hudson River. Some of them ended up being focused on various other things. And so what we've tried to do is kind of dissect, if you like, the different projects so that they ended up being more manageable and so that we could tie them to different grants. And The one that was particularly well suited to this area was the EFC Green Resiliency Grant. It was an ideal match. We applied for the grant and we were delighted to learn that we were awarded 2.5 million for implementation. And if you go on to the next slide, the project is to install a wet extended detention pond in village-owned open space adjacent to Farragut Parkway and Boutilliers Brook, which was that area that we were showing you earlier. And the goal is to store runoff during the storm events, which will reduce the volume and speed of downstream flows. And all of these flows end up going to our next door neighbor, which is Yonkers, and creating problems downstream. So our goal has been to retain as much as we can inside Hastings to be a good neighbor to the people of Yonkers, particularly those who are in this area. And that's been, a key element of designing this project and the way that we think about stormwater management sort of more generally. This project it's serving a 44-acre upstream tributary area, and the goal is to reduce stormwater runoff by about 2.4 million cubic feet per year. It will be supported by a conveyance system bypass, which will be made up of 30-inch and 40-inch corrugated polyurethane pipes. And the pipes will bypass the existing stormwater conveyances, diverting the stormwater from the area above that location. It's the High Street area. You might have to go back to the map, Jessica, to sort of show everyone where that is. So if you see where it says site BB6, it's kind of shooting, that whole area shoots water down into the location where the detention pond is going to be. So further down, if you shoot your arrow down, yeah, that whole area is where it will end up being. And the water from that location ends up creating really destructive impact. And without it, what ends up happening is that it shoots over to the other side and really turns Boutilliers Brook, which sounds sort of adorable and charming, into this torrent, this raging torrent that shoots through people's property and creates really, really, really destructive impact. And the whole area ends up being overwhelmed during storm events. So if you go, keep going, go back to where we were, Jessica. Yeah, and to the next slide. So when we've completed the project, and we can talk about it a little bit more, and I hope that our engineer is on the call and can maybe answer any very specific technical questions that people have. But as you can see, this specific project is part of a much bigger design, which is geared at addressing flooding in the whole watershed area. And so what we want to do after this part has been completed is install an extended detention shallow wetland, which would treat an additional 1 million water quality volume. I don't know how you say that specifically, but amount of water. Very untechnical way of framing it. And we also plan to address the flooding issues on the other side of Farragut Parkway, which will hopefully have been somewhat alleviated through this project. And if you go on to the next slide. And so, Jessica asked me to talk a little bit about what the success factors were for this project. And I would say if I had to choose one, it would be the creation of this village-wide flood study. It was super, super important. It identified the high impact areas. It provided a cost analysis for us it gave us a coherent, logical, prioritized plan to address the local flooding issues. It was really the most important thing. And one of the things that we were discussing is that for many grants, the flood study is a sort of a priori consideration. You have to have the flood study in order to be able to go into developing the project and having having something that can be implemented quickly. The other thing that was really, really important was to get on the ground input from residents. We interviewed all the people who lived, or not all, but like very, very many of the people who lived along the area. They were very willing to come and explain what the impacts were to them. We had letters from people, we had videos, we had photographs. All of that was very useful in terms of creating what we felt was a compelling narrative for our grant. The other thing that was really important, and this is a big shout out to the GRG team at New York State. The grant program was really well crafted. It was clear what municipalities needed to provide, and it was geared at a very real problem for most municipalities, for many, many municipalities, which is helping us to invest in basically improving our aging infrastructure. So really thanks to the state and to the team for having developed such a valuable program that we were able to access. And then, of course, our team was fantastic. So we have a very able engineer. Our grant writer is fantastic. Our village manager is very patient and thoughtful and organized. And so that combination pulled it together. And we also felt we were very lucky. You never know when you apply for grants whether you're going to have met the criteria that the granting agency has put together, and so we felt like we hit the jackpot in terms of luck there, and we really hope that it ends up making a big difference. And if you go to the next slide, I just want to share a couple of resources for you. This presentation Jessica will have, so anyone who wants it can grab it from her. The study is available on our website. What the link that's there is the actual study. There's also a presentation that our engineer Doug Hahn presented to the board, and there's a video of his presentation that you can also see if you're interested. And I also want to give a shout out to Groundwork Hudson Valley, which has done a series of case studies on nature-based solutions within the Sawmill River watershed. And the link to their report is there. And our area is one of the areas that is specifically pulled out and sort of analyzed in terms of potential solutions to help alleviate the flooding there. So I don't know if anyone from Groundwork is on the call, but thanks to all of you for all of your help. And just another group to thank are our Conservation Commission and Climate Smart Communities task force members, who have been really pushing the notion of adaptation and building resilience within the community, and have done a lot of great work in terms of creating climate vulnerability assessments and thinking about adaptation in a broader way. So I'm sure there are many more people to thank. I would like to thank Piermont, because you inspired us to really think about doing this work locally, and your mayor is lovely. He turns out to be a musician, and so is my husband. So we meet over music, not just flooding, which is quite nice. But that was really important for us to be able to see the experiences in other municipalities and learn from those municipalities. So thanks to you. Again, thanks to the EFC GRG team, and Jessica, thanks to you. And if there are any questions, I'm really happy to answer any of them.
Great, thanks so much, Mayor. Yeah, how's that landing for people? Does anyone have any questions for the mayor? Go ahead, Helena.
Hi, thank you very much. This was very helpful, and I'm so glad to know about this group. And just one question is, you mentioned your the neighbor to the south, Yonkers. Of course, I'm from the neighbor to the north, Dobbs Ferry, and then there are even more neighbors along the Sawmill River who are sort of facing similar issues. So I'm just wondering about, understanding the limitations, given the fact that we're separately incorporated and what's possible, but what kind of inter-village opportunities there might be through the county or the state or otherwise that could address these larger watershed issues, rather than doing it piecemeal. I mean, piecemeal is really important, but I'm just thinking about, sort of a larger scope for addressing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And my view is you have to do it both piecemeal and collectively. And so in the river towns, we have what we call a village officials committee, which is made up of mayors and managers from all of the river towns. And we meet on a monthly basis to discuss a range of different issues. We have actually met with the county on the issue of flooding along the Sawmill. And I think that Dean Taruli, who's the director of flood mitigation for Westchester County, is on the call. So maybe he can chip in at some point. But the county is interested in helping to coordinate. We, of course, are all individually interested in trying to do our part to keep water in our municipalities, but sort of reduce it if we can. And I'm on the executive of the Westchester Municipal Officials Committee, and I'm also on the New York Conference of Mayors Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee. And both of those groups have an interest in this issue. So I think what you'll find, Helena, is that there are groups that are trying to look at this regionally, but I think we each have to do our part locally to be good neighbors to people who are downstream from us. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and Dean, if you want to add to that, go right ahead.
Great, thank you. What I'm looking at from the county level is state legislation to create a resilience authority to cover the entire county. That would incorporate all the stormwater work and the MS4 program. That's really what I'm hoping to accomplish, where each municipality works with the Resilience Authority to deal with the issues on a watershed-wide basis. So if we can get the local electeds and the state delegation to push that forward, we can get that done in 6 months.
I love
Nice.
your optimism, Dean. We move at a glacial pace here. In fact, glaciers, I think, sometimes are moving faster than all of us. So your 6-month goal, I think, is admirable.
Well, I have spent the past 6 months writing the bill. So the bill is already drafted, and that's half the work.
Maybe you have the inside track on that.
Yes.
Great. And I did want to mention, just related to that, many places are having resilient New York watershed flood studies. I know there's a few in Westchester too, and I'm not sure how well, because they'll cover multiple municipalities. So I'd be curious how, those projects get implemented across municipal lines too, if anyone has any insight on that. Nate, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So I have two kind of specific questions, but the first one is the GRG grant. What was the matching percentage on that?
I think it was 20%. Our village manager is on. She can chip in. Mary Beth, do you remember the amount?
I think it's 10, but let me check.
Okay. Okay.
I'll
Thank-
just jump in if you don't mind, Mayor and Mary Beth. Ryan White's from EFC. It's
Oh, great.
DRG is a 90-10 match.
Right.
So it's
Perfect.
10% of eligible project costs is the local match requirement.
Thank you.
That's very generous. Yes, that's great. That's something we have to look at. And then the second question I had is that it looked like there was a relatively large tract of village-owned land that was available to establish this retention basin in. How is it that that land wasn't previously utilized, or what was its previous utilization? And how will this retention pond change its, value to the community in that way?
It's an area of land that is on the side of a parkway, and we have managed, I mean, it's marshy. It would not be a good place to build a home. And it was, we dedicated land which we felt was either obviously parkland where everyone would say it was a park, or village-owned land that we thought should be in the category of a park and not built on as parkland. So we did that. And I mean, I don't know if that really answers why it's available, but it's an area that would be fairly undesirable to build on. And part of the reason why is because all of this water is shooting into it, and it's got this sort of marshy quality to it. So it would really be, I mean, it should be prohibited from building there. If that answers the question.
It does, yes, thank you.
All right. And I have a question. How many phases do you think there will be of, projects? I couldn't remember if you said a number, but I know that this is just kind of one piece of that flood study, one of the recommendations, but do you know kind of how many phases of the project there could end up being?
So the next phase is to update that storm sewer map that I indicated. The last version we have is from 1935. I'd be curious to know whether that's something that's common to many other municipalities or not. And then the phase after that is, or it's kind of happening in parallel, which is to actually implement the recommendations from that are in the map in the study. So when you look at the study, you can see that there are distinct projects that can be carved out individually, and it's millions, and it's way more than $10 million to implement all of those different projects. So the goal is to sort of continue efforts to bring in money, either money that comes directly and only from the municipality, or money that we can leverage through grants or other mechanisms to be able to address those issues. And to the extent that we can use nature-based solutions, we will try to do that. And I should mention that one of the things that Groundwork Hudson has done for us and with us, and in conjunction with our Conservation Commission, is planting trees in the marshy area that's on the other side of the parkway, so that we're trying to use nature-based solutions to absorb more of that excessive runoff that we're getting in that area. So thanks again to Oded and his team for all of that. And actually, one other thing about the green team, it's all young people. There's Oded. You can tell everyone about the green team, Oded. It's an amazing sort of initiative that Groundwork Hudson has put together, bringing all these young people in to help create solutions and training them to be fantastic contributors to the environment in the future.
Yeah, go ahead, Oded, and feel free to drop the link to the report too, and if you get a second.
Will do. Great. Yeah, Harrison, if you could drop the link in the chat, that'd be great. But yeah, I'll just say Odette Holzinger, Executive Director of Hudson Valley. And we've been working with Niki and with Haven that's here and the whole team at Hastings on this project. Super exciting. We have our youth employment program, the Green Team. They do environmental conservation, and the reality is that those nature-based solutions that restoring the floodplains, that requires a lot of maintenance, especially where the parkway creates very healthy conditions for invasive vines to take over some of the floodplain vegetation and compromise the native habitat. And so with the wonderful work of the Hastings-on-Hudson Vine Squad, led by Haven over here and other volunteers, and with the Green Team, we're going in there and removing invasives, and also during heat waves, we come in and we help with watering the vegetation. And with this new project and the report that we developed with our climate resilience program, we're really excited to add this element of nature-based solutions and floodplain restoration to the entire county-wide strategy that Dean is leading for flood prevention. So it all comes together. Youth, climate resilience, habitat restoration, youth development, as well as economic opportunity for young people from Yonkers.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Emily.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple questions too. I just dropped in the chat. There's a bunch of great resources that I wanted to pile on that Harrison just gave a great webinar presentation at the Hudson River Watershed Alliance's Breakfast webinar series that really walks through that report. So if you're in the mood to watch another webinar recording, there's a lot of really great information there as well. So 2 questions, and my first one is actually related to groundwork as well. So thanks, Odette. I'm wondering, with the question from Dobbs about this intermunicipal opportunity, and there's the county scale, if the Sawmill River Coalition is playing a role in flooding and looking at a watershed scale and flooding opportunities. I know that the report is and groundwork is the municipalities, but if the Sawmill River Coalition itself as an entity is playing that role, I know there was also previously an advisory board that was in place, sort of what the latest is in terms of those watershed scale intermunicipal structures.
Absolutely. Thanks, Emily. So the report, first, there's kind of like 2 entities you mentioned. One is the Sawmill River Coalition, which is a coalition that Hudson Valley started following the daylighting of the Sawmill River in downtown Yonkers. And that coalition supports bringing together stakeholders throughout the sawmill, doing a lot of community engagement events and the floodplain restoration work. And then the County Board of Legislators, through legislation that passed in 2012, I believe, established both the Sawmill Watershed Advisory Board and the Bronx River Watershed Advisory Board. These are 2 advisory boards acting under the Board of Legislators for the county, with a main focus on flood prevention. And we support the Sawmill Watershed Advisory Board through programming and bringing together all the different stakeholders. Now, the grant that allowed us to develop the report that Harrison shared with the 4 case studies is through the Hudson River Estuary Program. And we actually shifted the focus of that report based on input that we received from the municipal, state, and county stakeholders for what would be most helpful. So to make a long story short, we brought together all of those players exactly a year ago, and led a tour through the watershed, where in each municipality we had the local engineers or the mayors, including Niki, talk about the problems they're experiencing. And what we learned from the folks at the county planning department is that well, what we know is the state is now leading all these watershed stream bed studies done with SLR, and the sawmill one is about to be published, and that it would be really great for those upcoming project proposals for capital projects to include elements showing what are some co-benefits that could be added to those flood prevention projects through nature-based solutions, as well as if we're expanding a culvert somewhere where there is extensive flooding based on the state studies recommendations, where can we show that we can also retain some stormwater? And so we designed this report to show those case studies and these conceptual designs, so that now when the state study is published, we can match those case studies to the recommendations in the state report and go together with the local municipalities and with the counties to seek funding that would support those highly needed capital projects along the main stem, but also treat the tributaries and provide those nature-based solutions added projects.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. And then, so my second question was for Mayor Armacost, for those problem areas that you showed in the flood study map, are those designated FEMA mapped floodplains? Are those areas that are prone to flooding that are outside of mapped floodplains?
So the whole issue of sort of updating the FEMA maps is a separate question, but currently I think the area that we're looking at right here fits into the current designation. We think the map should go further in, if you see what I mean. We think that there should be more of an area that is designated as a flood zone, but I think they're actually mapped in the report that Harrison drafted. So you can look in the links are, I think 3 of us have provided the links to the Groundwork Hudson report, and you can see the way in which the floodplain map kind of maps the area that that is part of this study. Okay. If you look at those 2 reports together, you'll be able to see it. I think Emily's frozen, so hopefully I answered her question properly.
Yeah, definitely. And real quick, before we go to Larissa, I wanted to just take advantage of Ryan White's being on the call from the Green Resiliency Grant program, and just give him an opportunity to share anything else about the grant program today. So go ahead, Ryan.
Yes. Yeah, and thanks for putting on this presentation, and to the mayor for talking about the project and getting the word out. Just to stress a couple things that the mayor touched on in terms of success factors. This was really a great project to work with the village on through the application process, and now moving forward into the project. The mayor touched on between the village manager, who I know is on, and their grant writer and their engineer. I think we met with that team of, the village team, I would say 3, 4, 5 times during the application process to really work with the village to identify, one, I think what projects that what issues they were having, and what projects that might be the best fit for the Green Resiliency Grant application. So having that teamwork through the application process, we definitely encourage that at EFC. So if there's questions about, does a project make sense to come in for a certain grant program, definitely encourage you to reach out to EFC, and we can set up a meeting to discuss that. And as the mayor mentioned, the flood study, the prior work that the village has done to identify the problem and come up with solutions is a really huge help to any application, because it really shows that this is not something that, was, frankly, there's a long history of, we know there's a problem, here's our proposed solution, it aligns with the grant funding, and it really goes a long way towards a successful application. In terms of the GRG program itself, last year was our first round. It's a state-funded program through the Environmental Bond Act. So the first round was $60 million available with grants up to $10 million each. And it really has a focus on extreme weather adaptation and resilience, flooding, CSO reduction. So this project was a really good fit for the program. We also have our Green Innovation Grant program, which is funded, we're currently in our 16th round. I heard mention of the Yonkers daylighting. So we've funded 3 phases of Yonkers daylighting through GIGP funds. Those are federal funds. We currently have an application period open for that. And with applications due April 11th. Some of the eligibility varies and kind of the focus areas, but a lot of green infrastructure, nature-based solutions, floodplain benches, streetscapes, things like that incorporate green infrastructure. So definitely happy to answer any questions, or I'm going to put our email address for our GIGP team in the chat, as well as a link to sign up for emails from EFC.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Larissa.
Hello, everyone. I'm a Watershed Alliance board member up in the Capital District, and just wanted to thank the whole team. I know I'm way up here in Albany, but I actually think I know exactly this intersection that you were talking about, because I think this is the turnoff I take when I go visit my aunt at Andros-on-Hudson.
Yes,
Right?
it
So,
is.
I might be that
Exactly
person
the
that has to
turnoff.
drive off the road to check this out next time I'm down there.
Right.
I had a question. I was participated in the Hudson River Advocacy Day this week, and one of the things that was floating around the halls, but we didn't talk a lot about, was the governor's amended budget and the Office of Resilience that she has proposed statewide to consolidate stormwater, flooding, I believe fire and other climate and other related resilience efforts. And I was just wondering if you could comment on what the mayors are generally thinking about this, or at the county level. Any one of you can answer. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Speaking on behalf of the mayors, I think all of us would like as much of a focus on this as people are willing to put forward. It's really, I mean, if you were to ask me what keeps me up at night, this is really the thing that keeps me up at night, that people end up having their homes flooded during extreme weather events. It's traumatic for people. And, that's what we end up seeing as mayors of municipalities, wherever we are, whether it's flooding, whether it's fires, whether it's, all of these extreme weather events, I think, devastate the people who have been affected. So whatever can be done in terms of programs, initiatives, and most importantly, funding to enable us to build resiliency in our own direct communities, as well as, together with our neighbors, I think is something that mayors support. And it's certainly something that NYCOM, the New York Conference of Mayors, supports. So sometimes the coordination of efforts is not optimal, and we don't learn that a project is going on with someone, otherwise we'd all sign on to the sign-on letters, but I think you would generally find that mayors are supportive. My guess is that the counties and other entities would also be supportive too, but maybe Dean can speak for them.
Just kind of hit it kind of hit the press, a week or 10 days ago. And I'm, I get the Times Union up here in Albany. So it hasn't made a lot of press. And I just wondered where it was at. I think it's in the amended budget, but that doesn't mean it'll necessarily go through. So.
Right.
Thank you.
So for the county level, what I'm looking at doing is a resilience authority. So it'll just focus on stormwater drainage and the MS4 program. And it should be able to make everything move a lot faster. It'll collect a small stormwater fee for the services provided. That way we can keep up with maintenance. It's self-funded. Since it's a fee, it won't raise taxes, which is great. And by creating a resilience authority, that authority can apply to the CRS system to hopefully lower insurance rates by give me 1 second, between 20 to 45%, which I'm sure everyone in Westchester would be happy about.
Thanks, Dean. Yeah,
That's
no,
my
that's
plan
good.
for
Thanks,
Westchester.
Dean.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
I
dropped
did.
the
I have a slightly off. It's not exactly off topic, but I wanted to give one other shout out to the Trees for Tribs program, because all of our work in this part ended up initiating all our, let's say, effective work of moving the agenda forward started out with the Trees for Tribs program. So we ended up being given, and Haven Colgate, who's on the call with Matt Hobby, managed that. We've been through several rounds of it now. And, you know, that program is much smaller. It's, you know, you literally get the trees, you don't get grant money, but it really helps to sort of move the dial on shifting people's perceptions about what's possible and about the importance of nature-based solutions. So thanks to, I don't know if anyone on this call is responsible for the Trees for Tribs program, but we love you if you are. It was very helpful to us.
Yes, another great program of the estuary program.